Dudes with wrenches here. What are we working on today? Well, we're going to work on something. Well, this is a common story for us anyway. We buy things at auctions we don't need, and we're going to work on another one of those. We've had this car sitting in the yard for almost 2 years since we paid for it, and we're going to get it going. But before we can do that, we got to move everything out of the way, because there's a lot of things that have come in since this car was. Now, I already know what you're thinking. Why keep all these cars around? You don't live in the country. You don't have a place to put them. Well, I like to keep them right around the concrete to keep my yard looking pretty, so I guess that counts for something. I don't adhere to societal norms. I don't believe in owning only one vehicle. And, well, here we are. Also, things like this Aveo, which are kind of a piece of junk, but you gotta have something that gets good mileage to get around these days. Have you seen gas prices anyway? Well, this one's definitely broke and needs a clutch, but that's neither here nor there. It's on the list of things to do.
It doesn't sound metal.
No, it doesn't. Sounds broken. Oh, we're gonna have to air it up. Yeah, you heard that right. We're gonna have to air it up because this car has factory airbag suspension. Crazy for the 90s. Because, by the way, this is a 1991 Lincoln Mark 7. Now, the auction I attended that this car is actually from was a private collector's auction. The guy had lots of vehicles there, and they were all under 50,000 miles. So the idea was that this car would be an affordable, low-mileage V8. We weren't really going there to buy this car. We were bidding on lots of other cars, and everyone just kind of skipped this one over like it was a nothing burger. And, well, how are you going to skip over a high-output 5.0 from the 90s?
I think it needs to go up more. Maybe a battery issue.
It only runs for so long.
To keep the battery voltage up so it can start the car.
Yep. Now, this car is plagued with electrical issues. We couldn't even know how many miles were on it because the dash wouldn't come on, the gas door wouldn't open, and we didn't hear the fuel pump or the starter.
Pump's moving slow.
We're 9 volt in it right now. I don't think the ground is helping. Ground's ready to fall off, so turn the key down. I don't think that ground is nope. That ground wasn't doing much. So now that we got the suspension aired up, let's drag her up the second driveway here and get her into the garage so we can start tearing into this thing. And maybe we'll do it the right way this time and actually make sure the engine turns before we do anything else. I think that's a good place to start anyway. I don't know if that's what everybody else does. I mean, maybe you check the oil first to make sure your stuck motor has oil in it, but I know a lot of guys do things differently. Whew, it's in here. I would like to highlight on the fact that we don't buy cars that don't run because they're expensive or that we want to make YouTube videos or these will it run things that everybody does. I mean, there's parts in there and that's why we're buying them. These are mostly just bought for parts. And then I get these harebrained schemes in my head that are like, well, it's a car and we can just use it for not parts and maybe just drive it. Maybe this one's kind of cool. It's like a premium Foxbody, realistically. And then you get it in your head and you're just like, I'm just going to own another car. That seems fine. That's okay. Let's make another car run, not because it's cool, just because we can. And then we'll drive it and we'll figure out there's 1,000 other things wrong with it. And then we'll strip it and use it for parts because, you know, wasting time is the important part. Alright, before I get off on too heavy of a ramble, which I already have, because I like to ramble, if you go back to what this guy's actually doing over here, he is going to replace all of the grounds and the power wires, because they're bad. They're real bad. We were not getting power to all the things it needs to have power to, and we definitely were not getting good grounds. I'm actually super amazed the air suspension actually pumped up and worked, and, well, it didn't when we originally loaded the car, and a lot of wiggling and jiggling of things finally started getting it moving, and we moved it around the yard a couple times that way, but nothing else on the car has ever worked, and I think starting with the electrical connections is important. I think that's a good place to start with this one because they're all bad. PSA for the day, make sure you face your knife away from you, boys and girls. Nobody needs any extra hand wounds. I constantly think about that when I'm actually using a knife. I think about the direction it's going in, and you know why I think about that? Because I've learned the hard way why you think about that. You cut your hands enough times, and you figure it out. So I'm just going to say it out loud to everybody so they can hear it. Don't stab yourself with a knife. You think, I'm not an idiot. I won't do that. You will. You definitely will unless you're thinking about it. So let's move on. If you haven't been paying attention, this ground is really bad. It's the wrong color of green inside because they're not supposed to be green. And it's got all the flaky bits that get in your lungs that you're supposed to breathe in real good. Don't breathe those in. But this completely needs replaced. There's no just cleaning the ends on this guy or re-terminating it. You definitely probably should look at your cables throughout, not just the ends, and maybe check resistance across them. But this ground, I don't know how it ever worked at all. Now, they did do this one proper, as Ford does. They made it hard to get to on the bottom side to unbolt, so you're not going to see a whole lot of that in this video of it, well, coming off or even being put back on, because there was no good way to get a camera up in there. So, just so you know. Now, I'm not really sure why we had to add this next bit, just to give you a little concept of all the extra things you gotta have lying around to throw something like this together. And when you are kind of a little bit of a hoarder, you just have a lot of supply on hand, because you never know when you're gonna need to fix electrical connections in the Midwest on a corroded old piece of junk. Now, this is a lot of spare parts I had lying around, like I said, so they're not perfect, so we're going to have to make them a little more perfect. And then it goes back to, Ford like to do top mount battery, and I appreciate a top mount, tap post, whatever you want to call it, battery. I think it's a better idea. Side post sucks. But in the aspect we don't want to replace our entire positive wire all the way across the car, we're going to turn this whole thing into a side post. And I don't love it, but it's just what we have on hand. And maybe it's more of a temporary permanent solution. Because at the end of the day, we don't really know if this car runs. It could need 1,000 other things. We are just gambling our time away right now, and we're using parts we had. So that's what we're going to do. You can complain all you want and be like, oh my God, he's changing now. It's all connected. Why would you make it a side post? Side post sucks. I know. I agree. But here we are, using what we have. That's why it's extra on the shelf, because nobody wants to use side post. Side post is bad. It's garbage sauce, and no one likes it. And if you're a side post lover, I don't think we can be friends. Now let's touch base a little bit on how Lincoln actually sold a Mark 7 back in the 90s. Well, 80s. Not really sure where the commercial came from, but I did look up a few of them. And there was a commercial out there that said something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, I didn't really watch it all that well. Lincoln owners know 3 things about a Lincoln Mark 7. And that's what you need to know is drive it, drive it, drive it. It's really a horrible commercial if you think about it. Lincoln really wasn't explaining the fact that they had a highly optioned, highly luxurious sports car for the first time. They were just telling you needed to drive it. And that's how you'd know. You'd know if you drove it. Well, the people that actually flocked to Lincoln were just people that didn't really care for Cadillacs, so they did have to offer a lot in that little ballpark of high option. But in 91, Cadillac really didn't have what I'd call the best of cars. This car was really winning the scene, they just weren't marketing it well. I mean, if you wanted a Foxbody platform that was just the rich man's version of a Cougar or a Thunderbird, you bought a Lincoln Mark 7. But, like I said, it was actually their first two-door sports car, and it was one of the very first cars they only made as a two-door. There was never any other variation to this car, and it did come out with a high-output 302 and airbag suspension and a lot of luxurious items, and by 91, it was rear disc brakes, it had ABS, why, we don't know. It really didn't help the car stop any better, it just made it complicated and expensive. But that's a Lincoln for you. That's any of the luxury cars, they just add a lot of options because they have to increase that sales price somehow to justify what they're actually selling you. And that's a Cougar with fancy interior and weird options that are hard to replace and expensive. Yeah, well, I'm talking bad about it. I like this car. I swear I like this car. So let's go see what the help is doing. I think he's scavenging through things again. I think he might actually just found the wire he needs and it already has an end on it. That's good. At least he puts things back. That's important when you have a lot of things. You start putting them in the wrong places and you end up with piles of stuff everywhere. We're already there, but you know, that's just how it goes. Now, if you missed where we are, we actually heard the fuel pump run, the gas door actually opened, and now we're getting a body ground on there to actually see if we can get some of the other systems to work. Hey, he didn't lose that body ground bolt from before. Good for him. Now, you'll notice that binger, chime, whatever you want to call it, we're going to hear it a lot throughout this video because this car was unhappy about a lot of things. Now, you will notice that the electric pixies are not playing nice right now, and our dash still does not work, which is very troubling because these are not cheap dashes, and we'd really like to know how much fuel it has in it, but we're just going to throw it all to the wind and actually just add gas because we're going to assume it has very little, and then we're going to fire it up. Did I say fire it up? I think we're going to attempt to fire it up, but at least now we know we have a starter too. I don't know if we skipped over that part, but it does have a starter and it does turn, which is important in the electrical pixie happening world, making things run. Now what our boy is contemplating here is the fact that we didn't put a lot of gas in it, and there's a good chance we're going to have to make the car level to actually get to the fuel pump so that it'll actually pick up that fuel and send it to the motor. So we're going to drop this car back on the ground and figure out something real fast. If the air suspension releases all the air when it doesn't see load on the front end, it actually pinches your jack against the ground. We're going to have to figure out why that is, because that's kind of a crazy thing if the car can't be jacked up without dispensing all of its air out of the suspension. Now you'll also notice that we tried to start it again, and well, the battery doesn't like airing up the suspension multiple times without the car running. It kills the battery and then you gotta change it. But I'll stop talking because this might be the moment this car actually runs for the first time in 5 or 6 years. This is that moment when you're listening to all that upper end clatter and you're questioning, did I actually check the oil? I'm pretty sure I did like 2 years ago when I brought the car home, so it should be fine. And oh boy, just like magic, the dash is working. I guess it just needed a little bit of alternator and some little mixing of the electro pixies to give her a little more juice. We're not going to question it, we're just going to enjoy that it's there. Now would be the right time to actually check fluids, I think. We need to let it all warm up and percolate and get her up to temperature and whatnot. So we're going to go through and actually check everything, which we probably should have done to begin with. I mean, the internet people definitely tell you that's one of the things. I think you're supposed to lick the dipstick or something and go nom 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 nom. But, you know, we don't do those kind of things here. I mean, we just push on through and don't do them in order. And we made sure the engine turned over. We got the electric pixies running. We started it. That's important. And then we're checking fluids because that makes sense. There's a lot of things missing here, like antifreeze and power steering grease. And in retrospect, we probably should have checked the air cleaner before we sucked all the dirt up into the motor. But here we are. Let's definitely do something about that. In the concept of first things first, we should check the trunk. We never have. Well, we were in the trunk. We read something on the spare tire that said if you're going to jack it up, flip this switch right here and the air suspension will stay where it is. Good call, Lincoln. And here I was just complaining that I thought the technology was really stupid because when you jacked it up and let all the air out of the bags and then pinched your jack on the ground. But that's neither here nor there. You already saw it. It was already at the beginning of this video. I don't know why I'm even talking about it. Let's move on. Now let's get back to work. There's a lot of things that need to be done here. We have to really kind of do a full inspection of this car. We've never truly looked underneath it. Well, I definitely know, well, these guys know, that there's brake lines broken. They're broken. There's fluid on the ground. The master cylinder is definitely low. So we're getting all the tires off there, and we're going to fix the brake lines. And we're going to stare at everything underneath there and maybe get caught up in the idea of, oh boy, Look at that. What do we got going on here? Definitely some blown brake lines. Also, that's an O2 sensor not hooked up. That's another mystery plug. And oh, that's an O2 sensor missing its wiring altogether. Oh, look up there. That's the transmission plug, and it's missing wires as well. I love mice. Mice are the best. Just horrible little animals. Here's this guy testing for rust again. I guess if you can stick your fingers through steel, it's not good steel. That's a good rule of thumb. Use your thumb. Just jam your thumbs and your fingers in there. Get the tetanus. You know, just really scoop the rust up real good. This has pretty good rust in these lower control mounts. I'm assuming it's because it sat on the ground. Without air in the bags, this literally sat on the ground. We're just gonna call that a drain hole, everybody. That's officially a drain hole. Ooh, mystery liquid in the back. Rub your fingers in it. It's probably not acid. It'll be fine. I think it's water. Probably exhaust juice. More potential mice damage. That's the wiring going to the fuel pump. Good. Good that wiring has been chewed. This is exactly why you inspect a vehicle that you haven't really driven or worked on, because it allows you to understand why something happens later. So when the gas tank falls out because the mounts are all rusted or the fuel pump stops working, you'll know why. There won't be much forethought that you'll have to put forward to go, wonder why that happened. No, you've inspected it. Are we gonna fix it? Well, that's a later us issue for sure. Back to the front where we gotta work on the brakes to get the rolling and the moving happening, and this Rube Goldberg proportioning valve master cylinder brake booster all-in-one craziness that creates ABS from the gods. God, I hate you, Lincoln. This is not fun, right? This thing is not good. I don't like this thing. But it's in the name of safety. Safety was good back in the 90s. We were selling safety. Did it actually make the car stop any better? I don't think it did. I think it just made it really expensive. Made it really expensive to repair, and it took up a lot of space, and it made them run the lines in really stupid places so that I couldn't get to them. That's probably just a Ford thing in general. These are all one piece, by the way. There's no unions anywhere in the system. You have to take it off one end to the other to get these brake lines repaired, and it's not fun. It's not fun. Now, looking back on this, these lines were ran in a horrible location. They weren't rusty except for where they sat in little pockets of goo, and, well, they actually came off, and that's something to be said. Just the routing was horrific, and it was very difficult to actually change them. When doing any brake job, you should probably wear gloves. I'm not saying you have to. This guy didn't, and, you know, brake fluid, it pulls all the moisture out of everything. So if you like dry, chappy hands that are easily scratched and broken and cut, definitely don't wear gloves and just get brake fluid all over your skin. I mean, it's probably not poisonous. I mean, as long as you don't do it all the time, it'll be fine. Now, as you notice, all the brake lines have been cut off the vehicle. We are going to reuse certain fittings because I don't know if we have those fittings. I don't want to spend a bunch of money on things we don't really need when the transmission doesn't work. We probably could have checked that already, but I don't have brakes. Not to saying you can't check the transmission without brakes. I'm just faith. That's blind faith in cars. That's what I'm doing right now. Just a lot of car faith. Now I know what you're gonna say. That's that copper line. You can't use the copper line. It'll have holes in it in like a year. Well, in the Midwest, things corrode and they get all rusty. And this allows us to not have rusty line. And it's cheap. You buy it on Amazon, you keep it in a box, you keep it around for a good time. And it doesn't rust. Did I mention it doesn't rust? Yeah, it's weaker. If you get some rocks thrown at it or something, potentially you could end up with a puncture hole and a little bit of choo-choo-choo-choo. And it's going to shoot out some brake fluid. I think we're going to take the risk. And you can take the risk too. It's entirely up to you. But I don't want to hear anything in the comments about how, oh my, you used copper brake line, car's ruined. But here we are, we have it, and we're going to use it. I've gotten in front of your comments. So there you are. Comment away. That's all I'm going to say. This guy's quick. Look, he's got all them brake lines on there already. He did a little splice union in the side, so we didn't have to actually replace the back line because it's not all that rusty. And now we're adding some brake fluid, and we're going to bleed these bad boys. Oh, I guess that didn't go to plan. The bleeding turned into another line rupture in the back. So now we're going to replace all of the brake lines, because why not? I think it's time to take a break. Every once in a while, when you get in a position where you're just really mad at your project vehicle, instead of leaving the garage and sitting inside and playing your Game Boy or just staring at your boob tube, you should probably just do something constructive. And that constructive thing for this guy is maybe clean up the garage. The garage is always dirty. If you're working on things, there's things everywhere. This garage suffers, like many others, from flat surface syndrome. If there's a flat surface, things will sit on it, and you need to remove those things. And it's also a dump all for a lot of other things. You know, people just bring things in and lay them on the floor, and you got to put them away. This garage is packed full of things, and we have to work in here, so everything has to stay tidy and neat. So when things like brake lines anger you and make you upset, you should do things like cleaning. I mean, if cleaning makes you upset, that's a whole other problem. Maybe you should give up on the car game, because if you can't keep things clean and you can't deal with things making you mad, which they will, I don't think anybody is really happy when they work on a car. You think to yourself, like, I enjoy this. I really love this activity. But most of the time, I think I just enjoy hardship. I enjoy pain. I enjoy my back hurting from laying on the floor and my hands being numb from all the scars and cuts. I'm really not against anybody that says, hey, I'm not a car guy, I'm not into all this car stuff, because most of the time I ask myself that same question. Why am I into this car stuff? Why do I enjoy getting greasy? Why do I enjoy trying to understand how things work when an engineer that's far smarter than me built it, and in my opinion, he built it wrong? You know, like these brake lines on this car that I need to stop thinking about these brake lines, because how poorly they were ran and just where they live on this vehicle and how difficult that's going to be to repair. But we're cleaning. We're going to clean. We're just going to clean. We're not going to think about it. It's okay. We'll get back to the car when the garage is clean and I can enjoy the space that I'm standing in. Because there is something humbling about being in a space that's not completely filthy and dirty and everything being back in its place. Once it's in its place, you feel better about your space, and then you're just a little more sane, I think. Your sanities are back just ever so slightly, but you know they're just hinged. They're just hinged on potentially the next brake line breaking. And I mean, that's all you can really hope for, is maybe the next one you put on will hold, and maybe this will just be fine, and we'll be able to drive this car by the end of the weekend, and maybe not. Maybe we'll just get angry and we'll go inside and play that Game Boy we talked about before. I don't know. I don't know. Oh dang, this guy actually started working on the brake lines again. I kind of missed it there. I was off on a little bit of a tangent, but here we are, we're back. What he did there is he actually made a little welded piece of line out of the old scrap that he got out of the garbage, and he put a fitting on it, and then he sealed up the line so it wasn't draining all that brand new brake fluid out on the ground, and you know, that's where we are now, cutting all the old lines off. Well, would you look at that? We got to replace that whole piece front to back. Let's do a little bit of movie magic, and ta-da! Stupid movie magic never works when you want to. You gotta do everything yourself, and your stupid internet and just things. Now this is where that brake fluid little line plug stopper thing was a great idea. Now you're gonna cover yourself in the brake fluid that you conserved by putting it on, and you gotta get all them fancy little wrenches in there. Now you'll notice a universal wrench. That's because the Union is pure Chinesium and nothing fits it. Now here we go. Look at all this beautiful copper line routed everywhere throughout the vehicle, all new front to back, left to right. We do have one brake line on the driver's side from the master cylinder down to the wheel. That'll probably never break, I'm sure of it. We're just going to ignore that it exists and that we've replaced everything. We have officially replaced everything. Time to check that transmission and see if those brakes actually work. Mind you, we have bled the system again, and oh boy, it does work. We actually see the brakes stopping the system now, and that's great, because that gets us one step closer to actually driving this thing. Now, I don't know if you noticed before, we checked a lot of these fluids, but we didn't actually put anything in. We just checked them. It was like, yeah, we did that. We'll come back to us later us issue. Well, later us is now us, and we're going to put fluids in it. AKA antifreeze, and we're actually going to let this thing warm up and heat cycle. And we're going to get everything good and percolated up so we can actually get her good and ready to do an oil change. Yeah, you heard me right. We're not going to let this thing out of the garage before we do an oil change. And this thing's kind of crazy when it comes to oil changes because it's got a plug on the back of the pan and on the front of the pan. I guess the engineers that put these Foxbodies together decided, hey, you know what doesn't fit in here? the oil pan. So we're actually gonna have to separate the plug so it'll properly drain. Now, I'm not entirely sure with this car why they needed to do that. It's a design, I guess. But, you know, somebody could tell me in the comments. Just poor planning, I guess. Make sure you get all the oil out of the places it shouldn't be. And then on this one, it's got a champ filter. I've never really seen a champ filter. It's not in my area. I've read that it's something similar to Fram. And this one not only was a champ, I don't know how old it was, because it was actually rusting around the top edge, which troubles me. But it doesn't look like there's anything inside the motor. Just rust on the top of the filter, and I'm glad it was removed before that became a bigger problem. Now, because this car really doesn't smoke and the oil wasn't really that bad, I'm going to put the high-performance K&N filter on there because we're actually going to run this 1,500 miles to the next oil change versus some of the other vehicles that we're going to throw a new filter and oil in it probably every 500 for a little while until it gets a little less smoky. Now to fire it up and see if she's a little less clattery now that we got the new oil in her. Now, I didn't want this car to be self-conscious, so I didn't say it earlier, but the rear end's a little leaky, so we need to pull the plug and actually see if there's fluid in there. Now, I don't know if you heard that right there, but that actually depressurized when we pulled the plug. That's never a good sign on your rear differential, and that's potentially why the seals are leaking, because it has to put that pressure somewhere. Now, the quick fix would be to clear out the vent and put more fluid in it and just hope for a good time, but we're here, it's up in the air, so let's actually pull the cover and inspect it. Inspecting a rear differential and changing the fluid is always worth your time. Rear ends are easy to break and expensive to repair, and it's not something everyone can do. So just check your fluid, make sure there's some in there, and change it, because you have no idea when the last time somebody actually did that on a used car. Now, this rear differential, outside of the last guy putting entirely too much silicone seal on it, looks really good. It's an open diff, it's not limited slip, it's a 327 gear ratio, which evidently was all of these cars by this year, but the teeth don't look nicked and none of the spider gears look messed up. So we're just going to clean everything up and put this thing back together like we were never here. Essentially, this was a waste of time. We could have added fluid, but I have a sneaking suspicion all of the extra silicone seal inside this differential housing might have been part of the problem to why the vent was definitely clogged and causing the system to pressurize. A rear differential will just chew up silicone seal like it's nothing, but it is not good on the bearings and things. Now, I know you're saying, he just said don't use silicone seal. Actually, I'm using the proper silicone seal for gear lube. I'm using it in a minimalistic fashion and only on the bottom half of the cover. That's how I prefer to use it, with an actual gasket if I can buy one. So here we are. I'm definitely not telling you how to do this job, I'm just showing you how I did it. This is how I traditionally do it, and I don't have very many problems when it comes to leaky rear diffs. Now, the camera was not recording when we were actually cleaning this vent hole, but I will confirm that it was very dirty and it would not move. So now that it spins freely and clearly, it's definitely better than what it was. Alright, we're finally in the final stretch here, boys and girls. Let's get all these fancy tires back on. Now, I would like to mention that these are a sport wheel. 16-inch rim was a big deal in the 80s. By the 90s, this was normal, but 16-inch tires was a big thing. Nowadays, you have 20s on gas mileage getting Kias, so, you know, that doesn't really mean anything today. But it's good to know and think back when 16-inch tire meant performance. It meant grip. It meant road traction. It meant a lot of good things that you could do around corners. I don't know. Just 16-inch was important. Oh boy, it's drive time, everybody. Let's get in and fire this bad boy up and go for a cruise. Time for that inspirational music again. Let's see if we can cue something up. Whoa, shut her down already. I feel like there's something wrong. There's definitely something wrong. We're driving a Lincoln now. I was told to drive it. We're driving it. We're definitely doing that. I don't think it's right, though. There's definitely something wrong with the brakes, I'm thinking. you know, all the work we've done to the brakes up to this point, and I feel like they're dragging. I feel like they're definitely on. It's definitely barking the tires more than it should. I don't feel like the car has that much power. It's just pushing the front brakes that are definitely on all the time. They're not lack of brake. It's more brake than you'd ever need. That's a problem. Yep, probably should have checked the brake slides. They're pretty rusty, but I don't think that's the total issue here. You know, when you leave a car with no brake fluid in it whatsoever, it's a really bad idea. Calipers don't like that. Rubber hoses definitely don't like that. And this is one of those specific points where everything went wrong because it didn't have fluid in it. Now, there's nothing saying that fluid in it would have saved it 100%, but it definitely would have helped. Blown lines equal bad brake system front to back. It's not only the lines you have to replace, now you have to replace perfectly good calipers and rubber hoses. Leaving things sit is not good for them when it comes to newer technology, if we call 90s newer technology anyway. You know, this goes back to why it's a good idea to work on cars with friends, because things like this will make you a little bit insane. They will make you unhappy about your purchases and your life decisions and the things you do, because now you're throwing good money at a car you don't even know if you really want, or if it even really works, because you haven't driven it more than 200 feet down the street. Now, it does now have functioning brakes. It has all new things. There's no reason for the brakes not to work. We just pray the Rube Goldberg ABS proportioning master cylinder valve contraption under the hood doesn't disintegrate on us. Yep, that's our hope. Now let's try this again, and I can't afford music twice, everybody, so we gotta go up and something like this.
Na 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 Lincoln. You gotta drive it. You gotta drive that Lincoln.
This car does a very good job of singing its own song. It has a very good sound note to the back of it, and that's brought to us by a 302 small block, and it's just a good sounding motor, and high output really didn't mean much in 91 as much as you like to throw around the words 302 high output. But I am driving the car now, and I do fit in it okay. I wish I was probably a smaller person. Most cars don't fit me well if I sit straight up and down. I mean, if I believe in ergonomics inside of a vehicle, I'm in trouble no matter what. So, what do I feel when I drive a Lincoln Mark 7? You know, they told me drive it, drive it, drive it. That was the only important slogan I took away from them. And you know what? It's not bad. It's enjoyable. It's like driving a Cobra Mustang, but without all the Mustang. You know, you don't get all the looks and the side eyes acting like you're a race car or something. You just get to drive and enjoy your car. You get to have comfortable seats. You do get the side of bad options, as much as that sounds weird. There's a lot of good options, but they're from 1991. So they were invented by people that were definitely over-engineering a good idea, and they didn't hold up to the test of time. This car kind of scares me. It scares me of all the things that could potentially break that I'm going to have a hard time finding. I'm going to have a hard time trying to get a hold of an ABS master proportioning awesomeness sauce valve for the under the hood bits for the braking. And I have a feeling it's going to break because everything else on this car has. There's a lot of lights on the dash that I don't know what I'm going to do about. I did research quite a few of them, and it kind of sounds like I'm just going to take the bulbs out. This car is not nice enough to fully restore to original condition, and it doesn't look horrible. It looks very 80s for being a 90s car, but the bike style came from the 80s, and it looks very, you know, not new, almost gangster-ish, if you'd say. This definitely looks like a drug dealer's car. You know, something somebody would have when they're carrying kilos and, you know, large sums of money. If you want to get into something that's Foxbody based with a high output 302 and a good sound and rear wheel drive, this is definitely something to look for because you can buy them affordably. As long as you maybe get one of the lower options ones, this one was top of the class. It was a Mark 7 Bill Blass edition. We didn't really touch on that. He was a designer. Think Eddie Bauer edition for Lincoln. He made women's clothes, smoked a lot of cigars. He actually lived a long time, but that's neither here nor there. This car is a good car for the money if you can keep it on the road. And you can change out everything with Mustang parts. So worst case scenario, you lose the quality options of the Mark 7. So what else do I have to say about a Mark 7? Well, you know, it is what it is. It was Lincoln's first sports car. It was their first go at a lot of things. It's cool in its own right, not because it's a beautiful car, because it's a different car. It's a car you don't see all the time. And so when you show up to a show, you're not one of 50. You're one of one. And we didn't let this one beat us. We didn't let this one kick us while we were down. Now, it might keep kicking us further down the road. Definitely. It's a Lincoln. What can I say? But it's a decent car. It rides good. And I kind of enjoy it. And I really do enjoy the sound. And that's the important part. And as crazy as this car made me feel, it definitely is paying itself back in returns with the sanity of sound, the sanity of feel, the sanity of me being able to drive this car and just kind of float around corners and be comfortable in my seat and get that rumble in my buttocks. So thanks for coming, everybody. And Lincoln Mark 7, drive one.